The night was never meant to be ordinary. It carried a weight, heavy, suffocating, and unforgiving. Somewhere between the silence of the rain and the flickering of a single light bulb, a truth that should have remained buried was dragged into the open. Bill never planned to uncover it. He never planned to become the storm. But the moment his fingers brushed against that small, hidden bottle in Hayley's office, everything shifted. The ground beneath him cracked, and the carefully constructed facade of trust shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces. What followed wasn't just rage, it was the eruption of years of buried tension, betrayal, and silent wounds. This was no longer a night of secrets. It was a night of reckoning. The night was silent except for the relentless sound of rain beating against the glass like an endless confession. The cold seemed to bleed through the walls, seeping into every corner of the house. Inside the dimly lit study, Bill's fingers hovered over the handle of a drawer he had never opened before. He hadn't meant to find anything, it had been nothing but an aimless gesture, a restless wandering of hands that couldn't sleep. But the moment the wood slid back, a faint yellow light revealed something that cracked the foundation of his world. The bottle was small, almost fragile, hidden at the very back of the cabinet, its torn label half peeled away like a secret begging to be uncovered. His hand trembled as he lifted it, but the trembling wasn't from the cold. It was the smell, sharp, chemical, acrid, the exact same scent that had lingered in the sterile air of the hospital room where Naomi had lost everything. It hit him like a blow to the chest. He didn't need to read the name. He didn't need an explanation. The puzzle pieces slammed together with brutal precision, creating an image so horrifying it stole the air from his lungs. Hayley had done it. Not fate. Not chance. Her. The air in the room thickened. A pressure built behind his eyes. Heat rushed into his veins like a flood of molten metal, burning away any lingering denial. His fingers clenched around the glass until they turned white, tendons straining, as if by sheer force he could crush the evidence of betrayal. His pulse pounded in his ears, louder than the storm outside. It wasn't a surge of rage anymore, it was something heavier, something colder, a quiet, irreversible shift. Outside, rain blurred the world into shadows. Bill moved through the hallway like a storm given human shape. Each step struck the floor with the rhythm of a war drum, each breath drawn through clenched teeth. By the time he reached the heavy front door of the old house, the last trace of warmth in his chest had vanished. He didn't feel the cold rain soaking through his clothes when he stepped outside. He didn't feel anything but the sharp, focused point of fury pulling him forward. Across the estate, the lights in Hayley's villa glimmered faintly through the curtain of rain. A fortress she had built with her deceit. A shelter for her carefully constructed lies. He walked with a terrible calm, the bottle still in his hand, like an executioner carrying the blade. Every step carved away the remnants of the man he used to be. By the time he reached her door, Bill was no longer that man. The door burst open beneath his kick. The impact echoed through the empty halls, a hollow, thunderous sound that shattered the quiet. The storm followed him inside, wind howling down the corridor like a wild animal set loose. Hayley froze, turning sharply, her body stiffening at the sight of him, drenched, unblinking, breathing hard through the rage sitting deep in his chest. In his hand, the bottle gleamed faintly under the flickering light. Outside, lightning carved the sky open, white and merciless, painting their faces in sharp contrast, the man broken by betrayal and the woman who had dealt it. The air between them thickened like congealed blood. No words. No excuses. No pretenses. The silence itself felt like it might shatter at any moment. Bill advanced. Hayley retreated. Her back met the cold wall with a muted thud, and for a second, the sound was louder than the storm outside. She could feel the air closing in, a shrinking space, a suffocating inevitability. She saw it in his eyes, the storm wasn't on the outside anymore. It was behind his gaze, rolling, dark and absolute. The man who once loved her no longer stood there. In his place was something else entirely. Inside Bill, a slow war was unfolding. Fury and grief coiled like twin serpents, constricting tighter around his chest with every heartbeat. He could still see Naomi lying on that hospital bed, pale and silent, the last warmth of her life extinguished like a candle snuffed out. He had believed then that it was a cruel accident, a strike of fate. Now he understood fate had been wearing Hayley's face all along. Every thought became a blade. Every breath, a fracture in the fragile wall between anger and the kind of darkness that could not be undone. Hayley's pulse hammered against her ribs. She could sense the inevitability wrapping around her like a cold shroud. Yet there was no regret in her eyes, only calculation, sharp, glinting beneath the surface like shards of broken glass. She had planned everything. She had believed she would never be discovered. But standing before him now, caught in the blinding light of the storm, she realized control had slipped through her fingers like water. Bill didn't shout. He didn't move with frenzy. His stillness was far more terrifying. His silence was the sound of something vast collapsing within him. Outside, a flash of lightning cut across the night sky, followed by the deep growl of thunder that seemed to rattle the foundation of the house. The storm was no longer weather. It was a witness. He stood inches away from her. The scent of rain, cold air, and the bitter chemical stench of the bottle filled the room. His eyes locked onto hers with the weight of judgment. There was no trial, no jury. Only verdict. Inside Hayley's head, the calculations shifted like sand. For a moment, she felt the rare touch of something she had not allowed herself in years, fear. The kind that crawls under the skin, slow and suffocating. She searched for an escape route, but there was none. Bill had come not to question, but to end. He lifted the bottle slightly. A small, almost imperceptible motion. But in that motion, Hayley saw the collapse of everything she had built, the fragile architecture of her lies, the power she thought she owned, the web she had spun around them all. The thunder roared again, louder this time, as if the sky itself split open. Inside Bill's chest, something shifted. Rage no longer burned, it crystallized. It became deliberate, controlled, lethal. He could almost feel the exact moment when grief and fury fused into something colder than hate. A weight settled on his shoulders, steady and immovable. A decision. He stared at her as if stripping away every mask she had ever worn, every layer of charm, every whispered promise. All that remained was the rot beneath, and it was vast. The wind clawed at the open door behind him, making the curtains twist and whip like the desperate arms of something drowning. The house groaned beneath the storm's weight. Neither of them moved. The tension pressed down, suffocating, inevitable. Hayley could sense it, the invisible noose tightening. She had always been the one pulling strings, watching others dance to her rhythm. But now she was the one cornered, her back pressed against the wall, trapped inside the architecture of her own cruelty. Bill's mind replayed the night of Naomi's loss in brutal fragments. The pale hospital walls. The metallic taste of fear. The stillness that came after the doctor shook his head. He remembered the way his hands had trembled then. Tonight, they did not tremble. They were steady as if they were made of stone. The night crept deeper into its own darkness. Bill could feel his heartbeat slowing down, each thud heavy, deliberate, final. His breathing deepened, dragging the storm inside. Every sense was sharpened, every nerve pulled tight like a wire. Hayley's face, once familiar, was now nothing more than a surface to imprint his fury upon. She was calculating even now, Bill could see it flickering behind her eyes. Not remorse. Not guilt. Just strategy. That was the cruelest part. He had lost everything because of someone who didn't even feel sorry. A faint tremor moved through the house as the storm surged. He stepped closer, erasing the last inch of space between them. Her pulse thundered beneath her skin. His jaw clenched. The bottle felt cold and heavy in his hand. This was no longer about justice. Justice belonged to a world of laws and order. This was something far more primal. This was retribution. Hayley felt it too, the shift in the air, the way the storm outside seemed to sink into the marrow of the house. There was no escape now. Not from him. Not from the truth. Not from the weight of what she had done. She had once believed she could control everything. But power was an illusion, fragile as glass, beautiful only until it shattered. And tonight, it shattered under the weight of Bill's fury. The walls seemed to close in, the room shrinking with each breath. The air was thick enough to choke. Hayley could almost hear her own heart beating like the desperate ticking of a clock nearing its final second. Bill loomed over her, soaked, silent, relentless. Inside his head, he was already past this room. Past this moment. His rage had carried him somewhere beyond morality, beyond forgiveness. He had always thought of himself as a man with limits, but Hayley had shown him those limits were nothing but a line drawn in sand, and the storm had washed it away. The thunder cracked again, closer, louder, splitting the night like a scream. Hayley pressed against the wall. Bill did not need to speak for her to understand what was coming. He had already decided. The storm outside had begun to fade, but inside the house, the real storm still raged. The rain no longer pounded the windows, yet the echo of everything that had been unleashed lingered like a wound that refused to close. Bill stood in the middle of the room, chest heaving, knuckles bruised from where his fury had struck the walls, the furniture, the world itself. The shattered glass on the floor reflected fragments of his face, a man torn between love and hatred, between the person he was and the monster he had just become. Hayley lay against the wall, breath shallow, her eyes wide not with fear of pain but with the realization that her carefully constructed empire of secrets had finally collapsed. For years, she had pulled strings, played with trust, and woven betrayal into silk. But silk, no matter how beautiful, always tears under enough weight. The mask she wore had cracked beyond repair, and for the first time, she saw Bill not as a man she could manipulate, but as the storm she had created with her own hands. The silence between them wasn't calm. It was suffocating, alive, pulsing with everything unsaid. Bill's hand still clutched the small bottle, now smeared with mud and blood. His heart screamed for retribution, for justice, for something that would make the unbearable weight inside his chest stop crushing him. But beneath that rage was something far more dangerous, the grief of a man who once loved the very person who destroyed everything that mattered to him. Every decision he could make from this moment would change everything. He could end it. He could walk away. He could become exactly what he had hated all along. His reflection in the broken glass seemed to ask him that question silently, endlessly. What are you now, Bill? Outside, the storm gave way to a faint glow of dawn. But the light didn't bring warmth. It was cold, pale, almost cruel, illuminating every inch of destruction left behind. Hayley's breathing trembled, her voice stuck somewhere between pleading and resignation, though no words came out. And Bill, standing there like a statue carved from rage and heartbreak, finally understood that some betrayals can't be undone. They only leave ashes. He turned his gaze toward the door. The night had taken everything, the trust, the love, the illusion of safety, and replaced it with something unrecognizable. His steps echoed through the empty hallway as he walked away, not because he forgave her, but because sometimes walking away is the sharpest blade of all. Behind him, the house remained silent, a tomb of secrets, a monument to the storm that had burned everything to the ground. And as the first light of morning crept across the shattered floor, the truth lingered like smoke. No one escapes the consequences of what they set in motion. Not even the one who lights the match.